Welcome to my American History Notes, where I share with you things I've learned about American history, things that are maybe superficial and you need to dig deeper if you have an interest in the subject. Um, I'm going to present some names and places, events, concepts, legal decisions that may have be interest to you and cause you to look. Now, I'm a Bible believing Christian, so I might have my own conclusions, my own beliefs based on my faith. And you, whether you're an atheist or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Catholic or agnostic, or just don't even think about it, you're going to have your own views. Maybe you're a communist. Maybe you think of yourself as a leftist or a liberal or some other political designation. Um, Maybe you're going to have your own opinions, and I hope you do from studying the subject. It's a very fascinating subject. We're on social movements in the 19th and 20th centuries. So some bleed over into now, but we're really trying to focus on 2000, 2005, and before for now. Um, the more modern events I'll discuss later in a different format. So let's begin, and we're gonna discuss today. I'm going to try to tackle the homosexual movement. And this is not a sermon, but neither is it neutral, because I'm a Bible believing Christian, as I said. Now, some of you will be offended because I don't condemn individual homosexuals who exist in as wide a variety of forms as heterosexuals, from extremes as, on the one hand, lifetime committed couples, to, on the other hand, degenerate orgy participants or child molesters. And some of you will be offended because I won't say that it's just hunky dory. God forbids the behavior, period. I will repeat this perhaps several times, but I'm trying to get an historical grasp of the movement as a political entity. Individual people who have sexual feelings toward members of the same sex have existed all throughout human history. This is not new, okay? I'm focusing here mainly on an historical movement, though not any one particular human being's rational beliefs about themselves, their beliefs about how they were born, confusion, pain, or suffered abuse. The modern gay rights movement on the intellectual and academic level is underscored by Marxist dogma. Queer theory, a term coined in the 1990s by gay scholar Gloria Evangelina Anzaldúa, influenced by French philosopher Michel Foucault from his works like The History of Sexuality, which I just finished reading, is part of Marxist critical theory. A little history review is required here. Now, the old left, supported by Stalin's Soviet Russia, focused on labor unions, economic class warfare, and communist hegemony around the world, infiltrating the U.S. government at the highest levels to mold and form policy. The new left, beginning in the late 1950s and early 1960s, focused on social issues like the Vietnam War, sexual issues like feminism, abortion, gay and transgender rights, or sexual liberation from traditional morals, and was inspired by Marxist thinkers like Herbert Marcuse, who was often considered the father of the new left. They were often at odds with old school liberals like Lyndon Johnson, who pushed reform and they opposed him deeply on the Vietnam War. There's also a clear division in the civil rights movement between those who embraced Marxism and Marxist tactics and those who wanted a reform of the system. Excuse me. Contrast the work of Martin Luther King Jr. and the later speeches of Malcolm X. Compare them. Compare what their motivations were, what they wanted the outcome to be. Now, these represent two strains of the civil rights movement. Modern critical race theory, two different divergent paths, and they were at odds with each other. The modern critical race theory also stems from the New Left, the Frankfurt School as expressed by Marcuse, and is often at odds with traditional liberals who fight for civil rights. I refer you to Randall Kennedy's criticisms of critical race theory. He's the author of the landmark work, Race, Climbing the Law. Was a Harvard professor. He was a black Harvard professor. Now, more on civil rights later. The New Left merged into the Democratic Party sometime in the 1970s. So we have that Marxist infusion into the Democratic Party. So the Democrats of today, Democratic leadership of today, is nothing like a William Proxmire or a John F. Kennedy Jr. Or even Lyndon Johnson. It's a totally different operation now, influenced heavily by people like Herbert Marcuse through the New Left and the radicals of the 1960s. Now, back to marriage. However, Christians a long time ago let government license, regulate, and define marriage. And that very government declared in 2015 that homosexual couples had the right to marry. Now, modern social movements that cannot find justification in the Bible or religious doctrine will find it in Marxist theory. While homosexual behavior is nothing new and is forbidden in both the Old and New Testaments, people who regard themselves as homosexual or being attracted to the same sex have figured prominently in history. From Alexander the Great to Tchaikovsky, the Russian composer, they've been involved in the great events of history. But in recent decades in America, they have demanded recognition as a minority with minority rights, and you can read that as special rights. When did gays, as they typically call themselves, begin to be a political force? Now, most will begin the modern homosexual movement from what is called the Stonewall Riot between New York City police and the patrons and supporters of a gay bar that was raided in June of 1969. Several days of riots resulted, and it has been said that at no other time had so many people who regarded themselves as homosexuals united for action. Movements like this take off when the proponents are able to claim a sense of political community and feel like a singular group as opposed to a collection of individuals with their own unique circumstances. That's one of the main points of political organizing, is to make any self-identifying group feel like a unit, like a community, rather than just an individual person, pushing against the wind. Raids on gay bars had long been a part of American life due to the general public disgust with homosexual behavior and the health menace represented by the activity that goes on in such places. It goes on there because they were not allowed to have what is considered normal lives. See today's controversy over gay orgies at bathhouses with regard to the monkeypox virus, even though the homosexual lifestyle and choices are pretty much accepted in modern society. Oddly enough, the death of Judy Garland, who was an icon to gay men at the time, was also thought to be part of the reason for the riot. The sexual revolution in the 1960s and onward that rejected all conventional and biblical morality with regard to sex provided the ideal time for such movements to come to the forefront. The result of the pressure to acknowledge the civil rights of homosexuals as homosexuals has led to their receiving the same treatment under the Civil Rights Act as any other minority. As a consequence, they're now looking for nothing less than full acceptance as normal and even good by society, seeking nothing less than a redefinition of the family and therefore the basic underpinning of civilization. They want to be treated as engaging in a completely normal and acceptable lifestyle. This is propagated by law and policy in public schools and colleges, as well by the media and entertainment. In November of 1987, the Homosexual Magazine, I have some cats acting up. The Homosexual Magazine Guide published The Overhauling of Straight America. The article called for progress in desensitizing America to the issue and to make it so that the average American viewed sexual orientation as nothing more important than what clothes you wore or where you chose to have dinner. Secondly, they recommended that gays expose their views as loudly and as much as possible, because when people get used to hearing about something, it becomes more normal. The idea was not to shock people, but to reduce the issue to an abstract social issue, a quest for human rights. They also suggested that gays be shown to be victims, not aggressive challengers of society. In order to make a gay a good victim, he had to be made to appear normal in every other respect. That's one reason why the media won't show you the outrageous and disgusting behavior publicly displayed at so-called gay pride rallies and parades. A Southern Baptist website once referred to the homosexual movement as having been an astounding success, where in less than two decades, they had gone from something to keep quiet about to being almost the center of American public life. In 1989, the authoritative public relations manual on how to, quote, normalize gay people was written and really didn't receive much notoriety. It was written by the same authors, Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen, who published the article mentioned before, and is really just an expansion of the first article. Its name was After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. In this work, the disease of AIDS was used to be a public relations item to gain sympathy for the gay cause. Another issue raised was that of genetics. In spite of the fact that no peer-reviewed scientific study had ever been able to prove that there was any genetic connection to homosexuality, it was often said that they couldn't help themselves because they were born that way. Okay, you want to make that argument. However, any Bible-believing Christian knows that we're all born predisposed to sin and mankind needs a savior for that very reason. Being born anyway is not an argument for any behavior proscribed by God. On the other hand, as feminist and homosexual activist Camille Paglia has stated, homosexuality is not normal, quote. On the contrary, it is a challenge to the norm. Nature exists whether academics like it or not, and in nature, procreation is the single relentless rule. That is the norm. Our sexual bodies were designed for reproduction. No one is born gay. The idea is ridiculous. Homosexuality is an adaptation. Homosexuality is an adaptation, not an inborn trait. Now, notice the use of the words normally attributed to discussions on evolution, such as trait and adaptation. So, to sum up the success of the gay rights movement, um, a, a, a number of groups formed to work for the repeal of laws prohibiting consensual homosexual conduct, for legislation barring discrimination against gays in housing and employment, and for greater acceptance of homosexuals among the rest of the population. By 1999, the anti-sodomy laws of 32 states had been repealed or declared unconstitutional. In all but 5 of the remaining states, the anti-sodomy laws applied to both heterosexuals and homosexuals. The Supreme Court overturned all state anti-sodomy laws in 2003. It ruled that a Texas law applying only to homosexuals was unconstitutional, but at the same time, the court repudiated a 1986 decision in which it had refused to extend the right of privacy to consensual sexual acts. Laws protecting homosexuals from discrimination have also been enacted, but largely at the local level. By 1999, only 11 states had such laws. Opposition to such laws, particularly from conservative religious groups, had been often strong, and opponents of gay rights measures had frequently gained their repeal. In 1992, Colorado became the first state to nullify existing civil rights protections for homosexuals by amending its constitution. The provision was struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1996. By means of a statewide public referendum in 1998, Maine became the first state to repeal its gay rights statute. In 1993, the Defense Department, at President Clinton's order, changed the ban on homosexuals in the military to a ban on homosexual activity. The much discussed policy known as, quote, don't ask, don't tell, was presented as a way to allow gays in the military to serve without fear of discharge or other penalty as long as they did not reveal their sexual orientation. By the end of the 1990s, however, it appeared to have done little to change the precarious status of gay soldiers. Most other NATO nations permitted openly homosexual men and women to serve in their armed forces. Beginning in 1995, homosexuals are no longer automatically denied U.S. government security clearances. Spousal benefits, such as health insurance and pension plans for long-term domestic partners, and the legal recognition of same-sex couples, gay marriages, also became gay rights issues in the 1990s. A number of American corporations, I think all of them, as far as I know, now offer same-sex partners of employees medical benefits comparable to those offered to employees, married spouses, and about 1/5 of all the workers are employed by those businesses. This is in the 1990s. Now, beginning in the mid-1990s, many states began explicitly banning same-sex marriages. By 2005, 41 states had banned same-sex marriages. The Vermont Supreme Court declared in 1999 that the state must grant homosexual couples the same rights and protection that married heterosexuals have. And in 2000, the state legislature backed civil unions for same-sex couples that offered many benefits similar to those of heterosexual marriage. In 2003, Massachusetts' highest court ruled that homosexual couples have the constitutional right to marry, and the state began issuing licenses for same-sex marriages in May 2004. The state legislature, meanwhile, passed a constitutional amendment that would have created civil unions for homosexual couples while restricting marriage to heterosexuals. That amendment failed to win legislative approval and a required second consecutive vote in 2005. At the same time, however, in 11 states, voters approved in November 2004 state constitutional amendments restricting marriage to a man and a woman, and in some cases, also banning same-sex civil unions. More than 20 states then had amendments. Connecticut, like by 2005, had amendments like that. Connecticut then recognized civil unions between same-sex couples, and New Jersey Supreme Court ruled in 2006 that the state must extend equal rights to same-sex couples. 5 states, several of which banned gay marriage, recognized same-sex domestic partnerships, which offer fewer rights than civil unions. At the national level, the Defense of Marriage Act, 1996, restricted the federal definition of marriage to heterosexual couples. But some conservatives, including this is in Clinton's administration, President George W. Bush, called for a constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriages. Meanwhile, a number of religious institutions have been struggling with the issues of gay marriage and the ordination of gay clergy. Finally, though, the Supreme Court in 2015 said that homosexual couples had the right to marry. This was a Supreme Court decision called Obergefell versus Hodges, and it's considered a landmark case, and it guaranteed that same-sex couples had the right to marry by both the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States. It was a 5-4 ruling. It required all 50 states to recognize the marriages of same-sex couples. So, so there we are. There we are legally, and that's never going to change. That's the barn doors are open, the horses are out. Now, you have to understand, there are many homosexuals now who are prominent conservatives, physical conservatives, political conservatives, foreign policy. There's a lot of them, and there's organizations of prominent gay conservatives. And for various reasons, they appear on both sides of any political divide. I predict that within a generation, there will be gay couples in fundamentalist churches complaining about somebody else's personal lifestyle or choices. We'll see. Might not believe that's possible, but you look at the history of America and religion and social issues. So there are a lot of things we have today that we consider normal and typical that would have been, people in 1900 would have been appalled at. So that's just the way things happen. So like I said, like I told you in the beginning, I warned you, this is not a sermon. My discussion about homosexuality from a biblical point of view would be for another venue, but not this. I just want you to have an understanding of the historical background, theory, and some of the laws and how they went to the right and then they went back to the left. So we're going to talk about euthanasia briefly next, and then we'll talk about cloning and go on from there. And I just hope that what I've said will spur you on to study American history, come to your own conclusions. All right, thank you very much.